All right. Thanks, everybody. You are at the Farm Bill Chat, and my name is Katie. I work with the Center for Advancing Rural Health Equity, along with Chelsea Canavan, Tara Lynn, and Angie Zhang which is a center within the Community Health Department at Dartmouth Health. And we are partnering with Kearsarge Food Hub, New Hampshire Hunger Solutions, and the Northeast Organic Farming Association of New Hampshire to bring this Farm Bill chat to you today. So we're super appreciative of Hannah Flanders, Director of Community Engagement with Kearsarge Food Hub, uh, Finn Shea, Director of Communications and Grassroots Policy at New Hampshire Hunger Solutions, and Julie Davidson with the Northeast Organic Farming Association. She is the Executive Director. We'll be kind of kicking it off with an overview of the Farm Bill from Hannah. And then Finn will talk a little bit about how the Farm Bill impacts food assistance programs such as WIC and SNAP. And then Julie will talk about how the Farm Bill impacts organic farming. And then we'll have a lot of time for questions and answer, Q&A session and discussion. Um, and this is timely because there are some upcoming opportunities to do some advocacy around the Farm Bill to advocate for things that will be most beneficial for local communities. We'll be talking about that and really would like to sort of hear your interest, feedback, and ideas for how we can engage more folks in advocacy around this important bill. With that, I'm just going to open it up and see if anybody wants to come off mute and just share a quick tidbit about what your interest is in the Farm Bill chat today. Does anybody want to share?
I can share
Okay.
um everything. The honestly, the farm bill is really confusing to me. So any kind of clarification or additional details is going to be really great.
Great. Thanks, Carolyn. Anybody else?
Hi. Um, I'll just say that it's mammoth, and I try to track a lot, but I feel like it's just impossible to track everything, and so I appreciate a lot of eyes and like a whole village of us looking at it and thinking about it and its impacts, and so I just appreciate kind of like a community conversation around it so that we all kind of can flag things for each other.
Great. Thank you, Erica. All right. I think we can go ahead and just jump in. So I will turn it over to you, Hannah. I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Thanks, everybody. It's nice to see many of you that I know and get to work with, and some new folks too. So, can everybody see my slides? Awesome. Yeah, I'm Hannah with the Kearsarge Food Hub. I'm our director of community engagement. My relationship with the Farm Bill really has been through learning about it. As Terralyn said and Erica said, it is a huge, very confusing piece of legislation. I'm honestly not going to claim to be an expert on it in any way, shape, or form. I think in trying to engage public education and helping our whole community understand what this bill is, and myself, obviously, as well, this is going to be a little 101, what is the Farm Bill? And I'm really looking forward to Julie and Finn's kind of deep dive into their two respective areas of focus. So, originating in 1933, it was the Agricultural Adjustment Act. So it was part of the New Deal to really respond to the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. The government came in through this act to pay farmers essentially to grow less, to reduce the food supply and stabilize crop prices, and try to put less demand on the environment at that time. So really what it did is it put money in the pockets of farmers. It helped hungry people afford food, and it's initiated conservation efforts as well. And over time, obviously over nearly 100 years now, it has become an omnibus bill that includes a lot of different things. So, what is it today? Um, it's a law that's passed every 5 years, And it is basically this big machine that tries to reconcile these three main parts of our food system, right? Agriculture and farmer support, food and nutrition assistance, and environmental regulation. It's further broken down into these 12 title areas, but kind of what I've been learning about the Farm Bill is it can be a really powerful way to calibrate the interests of these three different groups that can often work at tension with each other. Of course, the farmers need to be able to farm and make a living and get the prices they need. Then, of course, you have the consumers who need to be able to afford the food and access that food. And then you have the environment, which underpins everything. And as we all know, in the kind of profit-driven industry of the food system, protecting the environment and our resources is not a given in terms of how we grow our food. So, the last farm bill was passed in 2018. And so it's been a few years now that we've been running on extensions. And this is a general breakdown of where the dollars go in the farm bill. It was about a $428 billion bill in 2018. As you can see, the green slice, the majority, three-quarters about, is supplemental nutrition assistance and federal food assistance programs. So that's a huge part of the bill. And the other quarter is left to the conservation efforts, the farmer support, and then there's a little sliver of things that you might not expect, rural development, research, and things like that. And I think it's really important to just break down this quarter slice for a second. And we know that Finn's going to get into the nutrition and Julie's going to get deeper into the organic farming, but we're going to break down that slice in the next slide. But I just wanted to, learning about this, I was like, wait, so we passed this bill last July, the reconciliation bill, the big, beautiful bill. Like, how does that impact something like the Farm Bill? Because I've noticed that there's a lot of overlap in the things that that bill is funding and the things that the Farm Bill funds. And so the spending bill passed last July it went through a special process for reconciling the federal budget with only a simple majority. So it was like an extra thing. And the things that are normally funded by the Farm Bill were impacted. Cuts to nutrition assistance that we're going to talk about, fast tracking commodity programs and subsidies for mostly the largest food and farm businesses. These were all included in that spending bill. And so I think my current understanding is that the Farm Bill that's currently underway and being passed is an opportunity to reverse or change some of the spending priorities that were put into that bill. And if you look at this pie chart here, over the next 10 years from that budget that was passed, you're seeing a reduction in nutrition assistance, you're seeing an increase in crop insurance and commodities and things like that, which might sound great. You want to, we know farmers are struggling. Farmers are undergoing a very serious time when it comes to business viability. The economy is impacting it. Climate change is impacting our farmers. So yes, it sounds like a good idea to, send dollars to farmers, but I think it's really important to understand that the top 10% of farms by income are the ones receiving the majority of the crop insurance and commodity price programs and bailouts that our government is sending through things like the Farm Bill and otherwise. And people say they don't want their tax dollars, supporting the free market food system. It's really not a free market food system in so many ways. We have these, $32 billion in subsidies every year going to our farms, covering about 13.5% of net farm income. So we're talking a lot today about how to channel these dollars into the systems and the practices and the community support that we would like to see. So understanding where those dollars are currently going, I think, is really important. This is how the Farm Bill gets passed. The National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition was a really big resource for me in learning about the Farm Bill. This is a graph from them. Basically, you have the House Ag Committee, you have the Senate Ag Committee. They both create their versions of the Farm Bill. They need to pass it by the full Senate, the full House, come together, find some alignment, go back, talk about it, and then put a combined final bill to the floor for a vote, and then to the White House for the president's signature. And so where are we right now? In April, the House Ag Committee passed the Farm, Food, and Nutrition and National Security Act of 2026. This is about $390 billion worth of legislation. Note, in 2018, it was about 428, so significant cuts happening there. And then just in June or a couple weeks ago, the Senate Ag Committee passed a draft for discussion, a 900-page draft. So we're waiting on the passed version from the Senate Ag Committee, as far as I know, and then we still have some deliberation to do between the two houses, or the Senate and the House. So as we mentioned at the top of the meeting, it's a really good time to be talking about this and contacting our representatives. Um, we don't have enough time to go into both versions of the bill, and you can certainly look it up and see, various perspectives on what's in there, as well as read the bill yourself, or the draft. But general trends, it is more of the same. The vast majority of farm safety net dollars are going to massive industrialized monoculture farms. Um, does not restore cuts to SNAP. There's a lot more talk in the SNAP world and nutrition assistance world of healthy choices and all of that, but I think it's worth noting that it 100% puts the onus on the customer and the consumer education or even regulation of what you can buy through SNAP. And there are no limits of production of cheap or ultra processed foods placed on the corporations on the other side of that equation. And the House bill actively removed measures that would have allowed communities to pass stricter pesticide safety labels and regulations. And that's another topic that's happening in other areas of our government right now. The tension between the chemicals used by companies and the public health that we are all seeking to develop. And it may seem really daunting because there's absolutely, not surprisingly, an imbalance of influence. We have about 560 corporate agribusinesses, et cetera, spending $523 million over the past few years lobbying for the Farm Bill. So we have massive interests towards the scale of those, monoculture farms, top 10% of income generating farms. So our voices collectively are really, really important. And our community is impacted directly by what's passed in the Farm Bill. It funds cooperative extensions, which I'm sure we all have a connection to a cooperative extension that does actual boots on the ground work supporting our communities, protecting water and local environments. As I said, crop insurance and protection for farmers, funding for SNAP and our food banks, and rural development programs. High-speed internet is part of that. Clean energy programs are part of that. Um, and the bill can do so much more to fund systemic shifts toward local, diversified organic systems and nutrition security for all. You see, programs to the tune of $1 million or $7 million local food investment. And it's like, okay, that sounds really great, but when we're talking about billions of dollars, that's really a drop in the bucket. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from Finn and Julie about specific advocacy goals, as this is all very much in their wheelhouse. But just some examples of the advocacy goals and issues that we could talk about here in New Hampshire: preventing budget cuts and work requirements in SNAP, advocating for insurance and grant structures that actually serve diversified small New Hampshire farms. They are all designed more or less for single crop, giant Midwestern farms. Making sure that we're securing funding for farmers to build soil and build in climate resilient practices is very important. And land access is a huge issue for new and beginning farmers. And so making sure that we're protecting the beginning farmer and rancher programs and easements that help our farmland be more affordable. With that, I am going to pass it off to Finn, I believe.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you for putting this on, everyone. Thank you for being here. So, I am going to share my screen quickly. Okay. I was working earlier. There we go. Can you see my screen okay? Awesome. All right. So, just want to introduce myself. My name is Finn. I'm the Director of Communications and Grassroots Policy at New Hampshire Hunger Solutions. We are a policy advocacy focused organization, so we advocate to end food security, really at the systemic and legislative level, both in New Hampshire, focused, but also with our, congressional representatives in DC. And work to address the root causes of hunger for everyone in New Hampshire. So I'm going to talk really specifically about SNAP. Because it is something that is really would be severely affected by the Farm Bill, but want to just set this up a little bit because it can be really hard to visualize how those food and nutrition supports get kind of to folks in our community. And so we kind of tend to look at it as like this power grid that moves healthy food through communities to schools and to households. So it really is kind of that kind of process. And if passed, basically the Farm Bill would entirely disrupt these connections on really every level of our community, of our government. So SNAP, as Hannah mentioned, is and nutrition supports are a huge part of the Farm Bill historically. So, but as it stands right now, the proposed version of the Farm Bill, while it doesn't cut SNAP entirely, it does level just the deepest and most aggressive cuts to SNAP in the history of the program. So it kind of locks in that huge $186.7 billion cut over 10 years. That which was initiated during the 2025 budget reconciliation. States can't afford to kind of foot the bill and absorb these new billions of dollars in liabilities. It would really force states to restrict eligibility or slash benefit amounts, or kind of in the worst case, a very probable scenario, opt out of SNAP entirely or cut the SNAP program significantly. So a little bit of background on SNAP in New Hampshire. So we are currently 39th in the nation for SNAP participation. Only 32% of people who are eligible for SNAP are actually enrolled in the program. So we really have a lot of work to do already in enrolling folks in the program, in kind of breaking down stigma that's associated with being on SNAP and having nutrition benefits. SNAP is really important for our economy. It has a huge economic impact. It supports our local retailers, our farms, our communities, and really brings in a lot of federal funding to the state. And in 2024, especially brought in just an enormous amount of money to New Hampshire that would be significantly uh, lost if SNAP were caught in the Farm Bill. Food insecurity in New Hampshire is rising, and as Hannah said, like sometimes it's hard to see that it is here, and it's kind of hard to recognize some of the time. So again, and I realize that I am had the statistic probably 3 times in here, but I'm gonna keep saying it. Very few people are actually enrolled in SNAP who are eligible. A lot of folks in New Hampshire report having insufficient food or food insecure, including 39% of children, 31% of adults, 27% of older adults, folks who are ages 65 and older. So food insecurity is rising. Now is really not the time to be cutting SNAP and taking money away from the SNAP program. Also want to talk, because we work in policy and advocacy, we don't work in that direct food service. And the charitable sector really can't solve hunger alone. And so part of the reason why we focus so heavily on the policy, on the advocacy, on the federal nutrition programs is to support folks who are doing this direct service. For every meal a food bank provides, SNAP is able to provide 9. And as we saw when SNAP was interrupted in November, our charitable food systems were just immediately overwhelmed. And so we really need SNAP in order to support uh, residents of New Hampshire, but also everyone who's doing that direct service and farmers. And so it's this very, very much all interlinked. Often there's a lot of discourse trying to separate out the farm aid and food packages from SNAP, but it's all very much one in the same. So, talking a little bit about, or a lot of bit about, as it were, the impact of nutrition assistance programs in New Hampshire. Um, Cutting SNAP won't cut down hunger, and the proposed farm bill. So, in a little bit more specifics, it would shift the state's share of administrative costs from 50% to 75%. Historically, the state and the government have split the cost of running SNAP 50-50. That share is now going up by 25% in New Hampshire. So um, the Farm Bill as it is would require the state to pay 15 million in penalties because our error rate is 8.85% above what they set as a 6% threshold. Um, just want to mention that error rates are one of these really confusing things that is very much prone to misinformation and labeled as, oh, error rates are equated to fraud, which is why they're included in the Farm Bill, why there's a penalty. Error rates have nothing to do with fraud. They are a measure of administrative accuracy. They are, either an overpayment or an underpayment. They kind of measure what is going well or not going well on the administrative level and allow states to then use that metric to take action and fix those issues along the line. So has nothing to do with fraud. I'm going to keep saying that because it is error rates are labeled in the Farm Bill as, oh, a measure of trying to cut fraud, waste, and abuse. They have nothing to do with fraud and everything to do with administrative accuracy. And because most states have an error rate over 6%, they're going to be hit with these massive penalties. And the combined measures of the state administrative cost shift and the error rate penalty is going to be a $21 million price tag for New Hampshire. And this really means that it it strains the state budget, but functionally would reduce the SNAP program and threaten the SNAP program as a whole. It it imposes the Farm Bill would impose these really strict work requirements, these new work requirements, standard deductions. It would end SNAP eligibility for many lawfully present immigrants. It would impose, work requirements and specifically, and I forgot to mention this, I apologize, but it's specifically for older adults and parents of children 14 years or older. So really, really affecting families, especially as we know have often the highest rates of food insecurity in New Hampshire. So want to just touch slightly on opportunities for advocacy. Before I do that, a couple things that weren't on the slides that I just wanted to mention. Um, we are learning, and more this is becoming an issue that um, obviously DHHS doesn't have money for these cost shifts. They would need to find that in their own budget, and the cost shifts and the error rate penalties will mean that New Hampshire severely cuts or abandons the SNAP program entirely in New Hampshire, which would obviously be really bad. And knowing that the effects that it would affect everybody at every level of our communities, of our society. Right now, when it comes to kind of the political aspect of it, we are concerned that um, right now Senate Republicans are, I believe, planning to haven't already, but to split off some aspect of Farm Aid as part of a different reconciliation package, but one that would be completely separate from the Farm Bill, meaning that, any leverage that advocates have to get SNAP um, back into the Farm Bill, SNAP funding not reversed, would kind of be lost and wouldn't really be able to have that leverage if food aid were separated out in a different reconciliation bill. Right now, kind of the Democratic side of the Senate are holding steady on voting no to a farm bill that doesn't stop or delay these cost shifts or reverse the funding cuts, but we really need our delegation and everybody to understand how important it is to delay these cost shifts to states, to delay these error rate penalties to states, so that SNAP is not just decimated across the country. Um, if the proposal on the farm aid package that stands alone uh, passes, it would mean that there just isn't anything in the Farm Bill to negotiate when it comes to federal nutrition programs. So, all to say, this is kind of our message for our senators, for our congresspeople, is that the cost shift would kill SNAP in New Hampshire. The error rate penalty needs to be delayed. The cost shift needs to be delayed. DHHS does not have the money for this and would really need to um, either come up with that money in their budget or cut back the SNAP program. So we are asking that Democrats don't agree to any farm bill unless it reverses the SNAP cuts or at least delays these cost shifts for states. SNAP has always been this really critical piece of the Farm Bill and partially, a huge part of why it's always been this bipartisan bill. And kind of breaking off pieces of it completely erodes that bipartisan coalition and those efforts that have really been there since the bill kind of started during the Great Depression and really have a huge effect across the country. So we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of advocacy efforts, but I will also share a couple links in the chat. One is an advocacy toolkit nationally, but that also, obviously affects New Hampshire, and another one where you can contact our federal reps and talk to them about this. They're very open to hearing this. We have met with them, and we're hoping that they're kind of very much holding the line on voting no for a farm bill because a farm bill without SNAP is not really a farm bill at all. So, always happy to answer more questions about that, to talk to anybody about that. You can always reach out to me and we can kind of have a deeper conversation about that. So, that's where we stand in New Hampshire at the moment. So, thank you so much. I'm happy to, again, answer any questions.
Thank you, Finn. Um, and we are gonna move over to Julie now, and then we'll have lots of time for questions and discussion.
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm just going to jump right in. I was asked to talk about the organic provisions within the Farm Bill, but before I start, I just want to give a little context about the Northeast Organic Farming Association of New Hampshire, so we know where we sit within the broader context of just agriculture and food system. So a little bit about NOFA New Hampshire. Our mission is we actively promote organic, regenerative, ecologically sound farming, gardening, eating, and land care practices for healthy communities, and we help build local, just, and sustainable food systems. NOFA New Hampshire, however, started as a social and political movement in the early 1970s. Specifically, it was founded in 1971, and it was in reaction to the Green Revolution, a challenge to the chemical-intensive industrial agriculture that federal policy and industry practice was promoting after World War II. And so the movement carried ecological, economic, and food sovereignty roots for decades before the U.S. Organic label even existed. So a lot of times people just associated us with organic certification, but we are, broadly part of a social movement. And NOFA New Hampshire was one of the earliest farming organizations to pioneer those organic standards. However, certification didn't arrive until 1990 with the Organic Food Productions Act, several generations after the organic movement began. And today there are 7 chapters across the Northeast states who work regionally on policy together and also nationally with our various alliances that includes the National Farm Family Coalition, HEAL Alliance, the National Organic Coalition, NSAC, to name a few. And so, to a point that somebody made at the beginning of the call, there is the Farm Bill is huge, and we rely on our partners to help analyze and dissect different provisions of the Farm Bill. And so history matters for how we think about organic priorities today. Our focus was never just certification. It's always been the broader social, economic, and ecological justice across the whole food system. And so we need to look systemically at the Farm Bill, or systematically at the Farm Bill. And so, the organic movement that was rooted in agroecology was a refusal. It was a refusal to accept that feeding people required poisoning the land, impoverishing the farmer. And it's a claim that another type of agriculture and economy is possible. And so, with that, I am going to highlight a few of our priorities, and these are just a few. Our full platform is available on our website, but a few of our priorities, starting with the draft version of the Senate Farm Bill. And that's important to note that it is just a draft. Emailing our senators to let them know that we do not support many of the provisions of this Farm Bill is extremely critical. We need everybody to do that. And perhaps I just might suggest, while I'm thinking of it, so I don't forget, something that we all can do collectively maybe is pull together a petition. But first, our first concern with the Farm Bill, generally speaking, is that commodity subsidies persist that entrench corporate control. And a lot of these subsidies that flow primarily to corn, soy, cotton, and crop insurance through safety net payments tied to per farm size really enrich the mega agribusinesses while continuing to drive small and historically marginalized farmers off their land. So you'd be surprised to note that in regions of the Delta South, there are a lot of farmers who are actually tenant farmers. They do not own the land, they lease it and farm it for larger corporations. Second concern, equity and nutrition are erased despite years, and Fian just did a great job of presenting all of that, so I won't go into it. And then thirdly, we're concerned about continued erosion of integrity of organic in the Farm Bill. And so while there are some modest gains in the Farm Bill, like for instance, the National Organic Program funding is authorized to rise from 26 million to 34 million by fiscal year 31, as Hannah pointed out earlier. Like, this is small beans in comparison to the overall funding that flows through the Farm Bill. We're looking for stronger residue testing, or there is stronger residue testing and verification requirements for high-risk organic imports. And then there is new authority for the USDA to partner with nonprofits on regionally specific organic outreach. But the gaps are significant, and they're the ones that determine whether organic farms can actually thrive. For instance, the biggest issue that farmers in New Hampshire are concerned about is relief for certification cost. And so finally, they just opened applications after a 2-year delay on the cost share. So we're encouraging all farmers to sign up for that. It's first come, first serve. But costs are up more than 85% since 2002, and yet there has not been an increase in that. And organic research funding, which is really important, especially in the face of climate change, is held at a flat 50 million a year, which is a real dollar cut once you account for inflation. And there is no dedicated funding for organic transition assistance or market development. Specifically, NOFA has administered the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, which has supported numerous farms the past several years in transitioning to organic practices, which help farmers not only wean the soil off of like chemical intensive regimes, but it also reduced their input costs. And not to mention that farmers who I've worked with and met so many farmers who have actually have cancer from working with and near these chemicals. So, and then let's see. There is no fix for the organic dairy data collection gaps and no response to USDA staffing losses, which NOFA New Hampshire, if you don't know, it's not related to the Farm Bill, but all of the chapters signed on to a lawsuit last April, along with numerous labor unions and municipalities across the country to contest what we're calling the unlawful reorganization of the USDA. And we were the single farming organization that signed on. So we brought USDA into the lawsuit. And just last week, they filed another injunction and they had documentation that showed internally the administration knew that this reduction or moving of offices, particularly for the National Organic Program, would result in a loss of staffing and that this was intentional. And so that lawsuit has continued over the past year. And then the EQUIP, which is the Environmental Quality and Initiative Program, which provides payments to farmers for implementing cost share, has an organic initiative payment, and that cap is stuck at 140,000 compared to the cap in other programs of 450,000. And so basically, it's underfunding organic while rising payments further. And that's another overall concern with the Farm Bill is they've raised the cap. And so a lot of these payments are going to be received by larger farms at the expense of, smaller farms. And this is a competitive process for EQIP funding. So there is a finite pool of funds and the Inflation Reduction Act under the Biden administration was removed. And so we've seen a reduction overall in these funding sources. And while not specifically organic focus, I would like to point to the National Farm Family Coalition, their policy platform of enforcing anti-corporate policy, because I think that gets at like one of the core issues that we need to unravel within our food system, particularly addressing anti-corporate ownership of land, which will help make land access more affordable. But ultimately, they have four major platforms, I would say, is one, banning corporate farmland grabs, two, enforcing antitrust law, three, dairy reform through price floors, not corporate discretion, and fair credit and land access. And let's see. And then last, I'd like to point to something that happened at the end of June. I'm going to put a link in the chat. But there were three actions taken by all branches of the US government at the end of June. One was the release of the Senate version of the Farm Bill, which, as I've said, continues to support large subsidies to the corn, cotton and soy growers in various regions of the country, which are largely growing like feedstock and fuel, not food. So there was the draft version of the Senate Farm Bill, then the president's executive order that essentially is rebranding the same chemical use as eco-friendly under the regenerative banner, which, unlike the National Organic Program, is not regulated. You can use the term regenerative, and it can vary. There's no standard definition, and while there are concerns about developing a definition of regenerative ag, which are warranted, we also have to realize that that is not a regulated term. And what we're seeing is an intentional use of that term to allow the continued and persistent use of chemical regimes in our food system, and yet allow corporations to take sustainability credits and basically greenwash the food production systems. And in fact, there are documents that have been released that shows in Europe that the lobby intentionally was using the term regenerative in order to, mislabel their chemical intensive regimes. And lastly, we had the Supreme Court ruling in the Monsanto versus Durnell case that held the federal pesticide law preempts state failures to warn claims. So they've like basically stripped away all accountability. So they've set up a really dangerous architecture that just further entrenches corporate power in our food system, that is detrimental to our health, to food sovereignty, and to the environment. Um, so here's what we're asking for. We're basically standing in solidarity with all of our alliance partners and saying no compromising on the Farm Bill unless SNAP is fully restored. So it's just an absolute no, right? Your senators and say no. We also are encouraging people to sign on, our congressional delegates to sign on to Shelley Pingree's from Maine People Over Poison Act. Right now, neither Goodlander or Pappas have signed on to it, and we want them to sign on to it. And also from the National Farm Family Coalition, we would like to see the pass of the Farmland for Farmers Act and enforce antitrust laws against agribusiness consolidation. Um, and I guess just in closing, I would like to say we do not need permission to imagine a different food system. This fight is over the political economy of our food system, and political economies are changed by people who refuse to stay quiet and reject the notion that there are no alternatives to sustainably feeding our communities. So thank you for having me, and I'll put a few links in the website. But yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Julie, and also Hannah and Finn. Um, that was a lot of really great, important information. So I'm gonna just open it up to folks that have questions, comments. Feel free to just sort of unmute and ask your question or share your comment, or if you feel more comfortable putting it in the chat, you can do that and we can read it for you.
I have a question for Finn. When you're saying advocating to delay the, cost share shift and is that because you think it's more likely to happen, or do you think that that would really help, or is the real goal to kind of deny or reverse the cuts entirely?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the reason we are advocating to delay the cost shifts is so that states have more time to come up with the money, basically. Um, and not, immediately have to cut SNAP in order to pay that bill. Um, what was the second part of your question? I'm so
Well, I
sorry.
just I just think, do you still hold like, is the real goal to reverse the cuts and like not go to the cost shift and all of that? And are you proposing the delay because it's like a compromise that you think is more likely?
Yes, yes, exactly. So if they are going to pass it, um, hoping that kind of baseline they will delay the cost shifts, delay the error rate penalties. But yes, if they have to pass it, then if that's where we can get, that's what we get. But ultimately, yes, not reversing any of the cuts implemented in HR1 is the ultimate goal.
I have a question. I'm wondering for people that are interested in getting more involved with advocacy. I know that some links were shared in the chat, but are there, I know Hannah and Chelsea and I were talking yesterday or the day before about it's like I really like when I can sign up for email action alerts
Mhm.
and then you get the link to your email and you can just click on it and there's a script, there's who to contact. It just like makes it really easy because I think that can be a barrier to engage in advocacy. It's like sort of having to go and sort of do a lot of research. And so that sort of one click action opportunity is super helpful. Are there ways that people could um, sign up to receive those from any of your organizations? And if so, how? And maybe we could even send that information to people after the call today, if helpful.
Absolutely. You actually just kind of read my mind. I was copying links into the chat as you as you asked the question. So yes, there are a few ways. So I will send a link directly to our action alerts, which are more New Hampshire oriented. Um, but there's also a organization based in DC that does FRAC that does similar kind of food aid advocacy. So I will send a link to their action alerts as well that you can sign up for. And they're also really great at taking all of this information and kind of digesting it and making it clear and broken up and easy to understand. So I will send both of those as well. Just give me 1 second and I will pop them in the chat.
Thanks, Finn. I see we have another question in the chat. Um, Laura, would you like to ask it or I can read it out loud?
Sure. I
Okay.
just, I think this is for Finn. Can you explain further the concept that for every meal a food bank provides, SNAP provides 9?
Yes, absolutely. That's a really good question. So SNAP helps to sorry, I'm trying to think of how to explain this in a way that makes sense in my brain as well before it comes out of my mouth, which is always a question when I'm talking to a group of people. Um, so SNAP provides a certain amount of money, obviously, to families in order to buy food. And so that is not very much money, but is able to be stretched. It also means that the state, by having more people enrolled in SNAP, gets more money matched from the federal government in order to keep people enrolled to get that money to households through schools to households. Another part of that too comes with kind of free and reduced meals for kids in schools, so that kids are getting reliable meals at school that often, would not be a reliable meal at home. So there are kind of a bunch of different spokes to that. And I'm looking for, sorry, one piece of information that I just specifically want to remember the exact numbers on. Um, Another, and while I'm looking for that, just want to, and I apologize, I'm being long-winded. I'm gonna try to stop doing that. But SNAP kind of policy helps to kind of strengthen SNAP's purchasing power, so benefits kind of align with grocery prices and provide adequate support for families. And 1 in 6 people really rely on the charitable food sector, and so increasing SNAP benefits kind of helps to shorten that line and make sure that more people are able to receive benefits from the charitable food system. So it kind of works both ways. I hope that makes sense. And I can actually send more information on that as well, because it is just this like multi-tiered level.
Thanks, Finn. I'm wondering also, is it, I know we saw when t SNAP was delayed in New Hampshire that the food banks were overwhelmed, right? And so they were like, they did not have the capacity to cover the gap in the SNAP coverage. And I mean, others are probably more experts on this, but it seems like the food banks are really there for emergencies, not to ongoingly feed people into perpetuity. And so in SNAP also, like people get it on their card, then they can go. It's not like we need this like infrastructure, physical infrastructure, that
Yes.
like is very like labor intensive. people, space, other resources. So it's like a more streamlined, efficient way to get food to people, it seems.
Yes, absolutely. It's really important that we have these places where people can go, in an emergency or to supplement SNAP benefits. I mean, I think that's a big part of, um, percentage of people who rely on food banks and food aid and mutual aid is to supplement SNAP benefits because, you know, SNAP benefits are great. They are, too low. And we want to always, advocate for people getting more SNAP dollars, but different thing. But yes, Katie, that's exactly it.
Thanks. Chelsea?
Thanks so much. I have a bit of a different question. So Hannah, you brought this up. I'm interested in the issue of kind of the crop subsidies in the Farm Bill and how they go to, how they're instead of going to like local farms, they're going to these, mega corporation like monoculture farms and like how that's actually driving ultra processed food consumption. And I am interested in this because, there's a lot of talk about this, and it seems like, one of the goals in the dietary guidelines was like reducing consumption of processed foods, and that seems like a big talking point. Yet, like, it seems like this farm bill is actually like directly contributing to some of, or a lot of, like unhealthy food consumption in our food system. And I'm just wondering, Hannah, if you could talk a little bit more about like how that actually, like, what that link is and like how that works, and maybe also like what would it look like to shift dollars from those large farms into smaller farms? Like, is there an easy way that that could happen in the Farm Bill?
Great question, and I'm hoping Julie might also want to chime in too, but I think basically it's the hypocrisy of, on the one hand, saying, you can't spend your dollars on these foods, these cheap, ultra processed foods, and on the other hand, putting absolutely no limitations. And not only that, but subsidizing the corn, the wheat, the soy, all of these, commodity crops. If you look at the grant programs, a little terminology is you have the commodity crop and then you have the specialty crop programs, and there's a huge imbalance of where the funding goes. Specialty crops are fruits, vegetables, anything that's not those like top five commodities. And so basically and very simply, we are, because of the lobbying power of those giant agribusinesses, subsidizing them anytime there's a crop loss, anytime there's a shift in economic conditions. Right now, we're seeing the tariffs and everything. We're putting bailouts to these large farmers if they're struggling. And we could easily use that same mechanism for sending money to farmers to subsidize the production of healthy foods and the costs of healthy foods so that those are the more available, more affordable foods, rather than putting the onus. And yes, we should and can all make our healthy food choices, and that education is super important. But it seems absolutely backwards to me. And furthermore, I just feel like I have this question of broader economic question of why do we need to provide so much food assistance for people in the first place? Why can't people afford food? What's happening? And if you look at, how these businesses are run in general, all of this money is concentrating to the top of these corporations. And so we have this bigger issue of the, transfer of wealth to the wealthiest that's happening. So I don't even know if we can solve this problem without addressing kind of that larger structure of wealth concentration. But I also do not know how to do that. So I pass it off to others.
Thanks, Hannah. We just have a few more minutes. So just I want to sort of just see if there's any other burning questions out there. Um, I guess I'll also just have a question, sort of what is the timeline? Because I know with advocacy, timing is really important. So like what is the timeline for when people should be doing advocacy? ASAP, says Julie.
Right now. Um, we think first week in August, but if anyone else has different information on that, please.
I think it would be fantastic to, like you said, take the resources from these different places, platforms to advocate for, combine them together, and then have kind of a shared marketing campaign over the next week or two where all of our organizations include this information in our newsletters and, make sure that we are all speaking up in this window of time. Because isn't there like an August recess and then, whatever, what have you. So we should act as if first week of August, we need to have had this big kind of vocal response.
Great. So if folks could be sharing out, like if they're able to through their organization, social media, talking to your friends, your neighbors, and just trying to really get the word out and the resources for people to get engaged in advocacy. Are there any sort of like any final questions or recommendations? Or if someone is interested in like, are there any like working groups that are kind of ongoing that people could be a part of if they want to go deeper into this work?
Yes, NOFA New Hampshire has a monthly policy meeting, and essentially it's a working group. So that's a place to get involved. And I think other both like national and regional groups do as well. So I want to say the Heal Alliance has a lot of working groups. That's one place to get involved. They're national, but they have like regional chapters and focus.
Great. Thank you. Well, we are at time. We will send a follow-up email with these resources and contact information. So if folks want to move forward and take action or have more questions, feel free to reach out at any time. We also have a really short survey that we'll be sending out. Chelsea may have already put it in the chat. So if you wouldn't mind filling that out, that would be great. We're really trying to convene these chats regularly around different rural health equity topics. So also, if you ever have an idea for a lunch chat topic that you think would be interesting, we'd be happy to collaborate with you or sort of look into how we can partner with folks to host a chat on a particular topic. So always feel free to reach out if you have ideas. And we will be, it sounds like this was recorded, and so we'll be also sharing the recording and if you want to look back at it or share it with others. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend and enjoy the beautiful weather.
Thanks, everyone. Katie and Chelsea, do you want to chat for a minute on follow-up? And Finn and whomever else wants.